You might have been wondering this whole time, how exactly is D3 data-driven, and when do we manipulate our graphic based on our data? Well, without using dimple.js, we have to be rather explicit and a little bit more verbose, but are afforded much greater flexibility. And you could pose a chart as a question like this. How do I draw a circle for every row of my data at the appropriate place on my axes? And the most natural answer to this question, at least in JavaScript, is exactly that, a for loop. Again, how do I draw a circle for every row of my data? Well, we could iterate through every row in our data, and for each row, draw our circle with the value of that row. And while this is partially pseudocode, this could be a perfectly sensible way to think about drawing a chart dependent on data in a very JavaScript-y way. Notice how we have to be very explicit and procedural in how we tell the computer to draw a circle for every row in our data. But this seems a little bit cumbersome, especially if the structure of our data changes, we want to use a different data file, we want to draw a different shape altogether, or if we want our chart to adapt to some interaction from the user. Very early on when I introduced D3, I told you that one of the strengths of the library is its declarative syntax, or rather you tell D3 what you want rather than how you want it to do it. Again, in a pure JavaScript approach, we have to be very procedural with the computer and specify step by step what it needs to do to create our chart. With D3 on the other hand, we simply specify what we want, circles, data, in an SVG element, and D3 figures out how to best draw our chart. And one of the most mystical yet powerful features of D3 is the data bind, performed through the .data function. The data variable here is the same data variable that's passed to the callback of our data loading function, such as D3.json, D3.csv, or D3.tsv, which loads our data file. And if we inspect what data actually is, which we'll see in a little bit, just as with our dimple example, it's simply a JavaScript array filled with JavaScript objects that represent our external file we loaded. Again, this chaining syntax is hopefully very familiar to you now. Each subsequent function gets called on the previous return value, transforming the object as it gets passed down the chain. The first statement here finds the SVG element on the page which we want, and since there's only one, we simply need to use select. We then subselect all the circles contained in that SVG element. But let's pause here. This is usually where it breaks down for people. How can you select circles when, if this is our first time drawing this chart, there won't be any circles on the page until we append them? What are the circles that we're actually selecting? Well, if we simply select circles when there are none, we get the empty selection. Well, then you might be asking, if it's an empty section, how can you bind data to nothing? Well, I would argue, you bind the data to the circles that will be there. Well, this might seem somewhat circular reasoning, no pun intended, but let's break it down and really understand what's going on in this snippet of code.